They changed locks, added him without her signature, mistake, or plan.
The key I paid for didn't work. Have you ever walked up to something you knew was yours, only to realize, in one quiet second, it wasn't anymore? That's exactly where this starts. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Alyssa Carter stood on the front porch, staring at a door she had personally picked out, matte black, soft grain wood. She remembered the listing photos, the day she wired the money, the exact moment she told her parents, "You're set, you don't have to worry anymore." And now, the key wouldn't turn. She tried again, slower this time, careful, like maybe she had done something wrong. Nothing. Alyssa leaned in slightly, frowning. The lock didn't even budge. It wasn't stuck, it wasn't jammed. It was different. And that's when she heard it. Laughter. Inside. Not just any laughter, comfortable laughter. Familiar. Like people who belonged there. Her grip on the key tightened. "Okay," she whispered under her breath. "That's weird." Let's rewind for a second because this moment didn't come out of nowhere. Alyssa Carter, 32 years old, didn't inherit anything. She didn't marry into money. She didn't get lucky. She worked senior project manager at a mid-sized tech firm. Long hours, weekends, promotions she had to fight for. While other people her age were traveling, upgrading cars, or posting beach photos, Alyssa was budgeting, saving, planning. For one thing, her parents, Linda and David Carter. Linda, 61, had this way of sounding sweet while quietly steering everything her direction. The kind of person who'd say, "Oh, it's fine, don't worry about me," while making sure you absolutely did worry. David, 64, was the opposite. Quiet, passive, the kind of man who avoided conflict so completely you sometimes wondered if he had opinions at all. And then there was Ethan, her younger brother, 28. Charming, funny, always had an idea, never had a plan. Jobs came and went, money came and went faster, but somehow, the attention, the support, that always stayed. Because in the Carter family, the roles were clear even if no one ever said them out loud. Alyssa was the one who handled things. Ethan was the one who was handled. So when her parents started talking about retirement, about downsizing, about figuring something out, Alyssa didn't hesitate. She stepped in. No loans, no shared ownership, no conditions. She bought the house outright. $420,000. A quiet Lakeview property, single story, safe neighborhood, exactly what they needed. And for a moment, it felt right. Her mom cried when she saw it. Her dad shook her hand like she'd just closed a business deal. Even Ethan said, "Wow, you really did that." But now, standing on that porch, key in hand, something felt off. Because houses don't just stop recognizing keys. People change the locks, and people only change the locks when they don't want someone getting in. Alyssa stepped back slightly, her eyes scanning the windows. Movement. Shadows shifting inside. They knew she was here. So why hadn't anyone opened the door? Why let her stand out here like this? And then the handle turned. The door opened. Her father stood there, completely relaxed. Like nothing was wrong. Like this was normal. "Hey," he said casually. Alyssa blinked. "My key doesn't work." A pause. Just long enough to feel intentional. Then he smiled. "Oh, yeah," he said. "We updated the locks." Updated. Just like that. No warning, no conversation. Behind him, Alyssa could see her mother walking into view. And further back, Ethan, leaning against the kitchen counter. Like he belonged there. Like this wasn't news. Like this had already been decided. Alyssa didn't step inside yet. She just stood there, still holding the key, still processing. And then her mother added, almost as an afterthought, "Oh, and we put your brother on the deed." Silence. No explanation. No apology. Just fact. And in that exact moment, something shifted. Not loudly. Not dramatically, but completely. Because Alyssa didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't ask why. She just looked at them and stepped inside. Quiet, controlled, watching, calculating. Because if there was one thing Alyssa Carter had learned after years of being the responsible one, it was this. You don't react when something feels wrong. You observe. And right then, she was already noticing things they hadn't thought about. Small things, important things, things that didn't add up. And as she crossed that threshold, she realized something that changed everything. They thought this was over. But for her, it had just started. They thought I'd just accept it, like I always had. Alyssa stepped inside the house she paid for and instantly felt like a guest. Have you ever walked into a place that should feel familiar but doesn't anymore? That was this. The air smelled different. Not bad, just different. A new candle maybe. Something floral that her mom liked, but Alyssa specifically didn't choose when she furnished the place. Her eyes moved slowly. The couch shifted. The dining table rotated. The framed lake photo she picked out, gone. Replaced. Everything was subtle but intentional. Like someone had quietly rewritten the space. Do you like what we did? Linda asked, smiling too brightly. Alyssa nodded once. It's different. Short answer. Neutral tone. But inside, she was cataloging everything. Because none of this had been discussed. Not one call, not one text, not even a casual, hey, we're thinking of changing a few things. And yet, new locks, new layout, new ownership. Ownership. That word echoed. Alyssa turned slightly, finally looking directly at Ethan. He didn't look uncomfortable. Didn't look surprised. Didn't look like someone who had just been handed partial ownership of a $420,000 home he didn't pay for. He looked settled, comfortable, like this was expected. Yeah, we figured it just made sense, Ethan said, shrugging lightly. You know, family property and all. Family property. Alyssa let that sit in the air for a second. Then she asked calmly, when did that happen? Linda answered too quickly. Oh, recently, it was just paperwork. Just paperwork. That phrase again? Simple, dismissive. Like adding someone to a legal deed was the same as changing throw pillows. Alyssa's eyes shifted to her father. David avoided them immediately. Instead, he walked toward the kitchen, grabbing a glass like he suddenly needed water. That told her everything she needed to know. He knew. He just didn't want to be the one to say it. Did I sign something? Alyssa asked. A small question, but it landed heavy. Linda's smile flickered just for a second. Well, no, but what? There it was. The first crack. Ethan stepped in, tone shifting slightly. Why are you making this a big deal? Big deal. Alyssa almost laughed, but didn't. Because this wasn't confusion anymore. This was strategy. She walked further into the kitchen, her movements slow, deliberate, and that's when she saw it. A stack of papers. Not hidden. Not locked away. Just sitting there on the counter like they didn't matter. But they did. Because Alyssa recognized the formatting instantly. County filing documents. Her chest tightened, but her face stayed neutral. Can I see those? She asked casually. Linda hesitated. Just for a second. Then, oh, it's nothing important, she said, stepping slightly in front of them. Just boring house stuff. House stuff. Right. Alyssa nodded again. No pushback. No argument. And that's what made it dangerous. Because they were expecting a reaction. An emotional response. Frustration, anger, confusion. Something they could deflect. But Alyssa didn't give them that. Instead, she stepped back. Took one last look around the house. At Ethan leaning like he owned it. At her mother controlling the space. At her father pretending not to see any of it. And then she said something that surprised all of them. Looks good. That's it. No confrontation. No accusation. Just acceptance. Or at least, that's what it looked like. Because 5 minutes later, she was back in her car. Door closed. Engine off. Silence. And for the first time since arriving, her expression changed. Not hurt. Not even anger. Something sharper. focused, because now she knew for sure. They hadn't just changed the locks. They had changed something legal, something official. Without her, and worse, they thought she wouldn't question it, wouldn't challenge it, wouldn't even check. Alyssa pulled out her phone slowly, not to call them. Not yet. Instead, she opened her email, scrolled, found the original purchase documents, every receipt, every signature, every line. And as she stared at the screen, one thought settled in clearly. Cold, precise. They didn't even check if they could do this. She leaned back in her seat, exhaling once. Because if there was one thing Alyssa understood better than anything else, it was paperwork. And right now, something about this situation didn't just feel wrong. It felt impossible, which meant there was only one explanation. Someone had made a mistake. And mistakes like this didn't stay quiet for long. They thought silence meant permission. 3 days passed. No calls. No texts. No follow-ups. Nothing. And that was exactly what they expected. Because in their minds, Alyssa had already accepted it. But here's the question. What kind of person spends $420,000 and doesn't even ask how their own name disappeared? Not Alyssa. She just wasn't the type to react immediately. She was the type to prepare. The morning of the third day, Alyssa sat at her dining table, laptop open, documents spread out in neat, precise rows. Purchase agreement, wire confirmation, title insurance, county records. Everything was there, exactly as she remembered. Owner, Alyssa Carter. Only Alyssa Carter. No co-owners, no clauses, no transfer agreements. Clean, simple, final. So how does someone go from sole owner to locked out? Alyssa leaned back slightly, tapping her finger once against the table. There were only a few possibilities, and none of them were good. Later that afternoon, she drove back. Not to confront them. Not yet. Just to observe. Because people reveal more when they think everything is settled. The house came into view, and immediately, something else felt off. A car she didn't recognize was parked in the driveway. Not Ethan's. Not her parents'. Someone else. Alyssa slowed the car but didn't stop right away. Instead, she watched. The front door opened. A woman stepped out. Mid 30s, professional, clipboard in hand. Then another couple followed behind her, looking around, nodding, asking questions. Alyssa's eyes narrowed. Wait. No, that didn't make sense. She pulled over across the street, heart beating just a little faster now. Because she knew that setup. She'd seen it before. Too many times. That wasn't a visit. That was a showing. Are they selling it? She whispered. But why would they? They had just moved in. They had just changed the locks. They had just added Ethan to the deed. Unless this was never about living there. Alyssa stepped out of the car, closing the door quietly. She walked toward the house, steady, controlled. No rush, no panic, just clarity building with every step. As she got closer, she caught pieces of conversation. It's a great location. Recently updated. Move-in ready. The woman with the clipboard, definitely a realtor, was smiling, gesturing toward the lake view. Alyssa stopped just short of the driveway. And for a moment, she just watched. Her parents stood there, acting like sellers, Ethan beside them. Relaxed, confident, like this had always been the plan. And that's when it clicked. Not slowly, not uncertainly, completely. They didn't just take the house. They were flipping it, using her money, her purchase, her name, or what they thought was no longer her name, to make a profit. Alyssa felt something shift again. Not shock. That part was gone. This was something colder, cleaner, understanding. Because now the pieces fit. The rushed updates. The sudden deed change. The new locks. It wasn't about control. It was about access. Sell the house. split the money. And Alyssa, she'd be, what? Cut out? Ignored? Expected to stay quiet? Alyssa took one more step forward. The gravel shifted under her shoe. The sound caught attention. Ethan looked up first. And the moment he saw her, that confidence, it flickered. Just slightly. Hey, he called out, forcing a casual tone. Didn't expect you today. Of course not. Because they thought they had time. Time to sell. Time to close. Time to disappear with the profit before she ever questioned anything. Alyssa gave a small, polite smile, the kind that revealed nothing. Yeah, she said, I was in the area. The realtor turned professional as ever. Oh, hi there, are you family? Alyssa paused. Just for a second. Then she said something simple, but loaded. Something like that. Her eyes moved past the realtor, landing directly on her mother, who no longer looked relaxed. Because now, Linda understood. Alyssa wasn't here by accident. And she wasn't here to visit. She was here because she knew not everything. Not yet. But enough. And the real problem? She wasn't reacting. She was watching, calculating, and that was something they had never learned how to deal with. Because this time, Alyssa wasn't playing her usual role. This time, she was letting them continue. Letting them talk. Letting them try to sell something they didn't legally own. And that meant only one thing. This wasn't going to stay a family issue. This was about to become something else entirely. Something public. Something legal. Something they couldn't talk their way out of. Alyssa slipped her phone into her pocket, her expression calm. Because the next move was already decided. And they had no idea what was coming. 3 days later, they listed the house. Let that sink in. Not a conversation. Not a warning. Not even a message. Just a listing. Alyssa didn't hear it from them. She saw it. Scrolling late at night, half focused, just clearing emails, checking notifications, and then it appeared. A thumbnail image. Familiar. Too familiar. Her house. The angle. The lighting. The lake in the background. And underneath it, $509,900. Newly updated lakefront property. Alyssa didn't blink. Didn't gasp. Didn't react at all. She just clicked. Because sometimes the most shocking things don't feel real until you look straight at them. The listing opened. And there it was. Every room. Every detail. Everything she had paid for repackaged. Rewritten. Rebranded. Beautifully maintained home with recent upgrades. Upgrades. That word again. Photos of the living room rearranged. Kitchen staged. Bedrooms neutralized. And then the line that made her pause. Ownership recently updated, ready for immediate sale. Ownership recently updated. Alyssa leaned back slowly in her chair. Now the timeline made sense. They weren't settling in. They were setting up. The locks weren't about keeping her out emotionally. They were about keeping her out legally. Or at least, that's what they thought. The next morning, Alyssa made one call. Not to her parents. Not to Ethan. To someone who dealt in facts. Not feelings. Mark Feldman, real estate attorney, 45. He picked up on the second ring. Alyssa Carter, he said, recognizing the name immediately. What can I do for you? Her tone was calm. Measured. I need you to look at something, she said, and I need you to be very direct with me. There was a pause. I can do that. An hour later, Alyssa sat across from him in his office. Documents laid out, clean, organized, precise. Mark flipped through them one by one. Purchase agreement. Wire transfer confirmation. Original deed. He nodded slightly as he read. So far, he said, this is straightforward. You purchased the property outright, sole ownership. Alyssa didn't respond, because she already knew that part. That's not the issue, she said. She slid her phone across the table. The listing. Mark studied it. then leaned back slightly. Okay, that one word carried weight. Now show me what changed, he said. Alyssa hesitated for just a second, then spoke. They said they added my brother to the deed. Mark's expression shifted just slightly. Did you sign anything? No. Authorize anything? No. Power of attorney? Joint ownership agreement? No. Silence. Mark closed the file slowly, then reached for his keyboard. Let's check the county records. The room felt different now. Quieter, more focused. The kind of silence where something important is about to surface. Mark typed, clicked, scrolled, then stopped. His eyes narrowed slightly at the screen. That's interesting. Alyssa leaned forward. What? He turned the monitor slightly toward her. There is a deed update, he said. Her stomach dropped, but her face didn't show it. Filed 3 days ago. 3 days. Exactly when everything changed. Added party, Ethan Carter. There it was. Real. Official. On record. But then, Mark didn't look convinced. He leaned in closer. Scrolling again. Wait. That word. That small, quiet word. That's the one that changes everything. What? Alyssa asked. Mark pointed at the document. This filing, he said slowly, shouldn't have gone through like this. Alyssa's pulse picked up just slightly. Why? Mark sat back, eyes still on the screen. Because this kind of ownership transfer, he said carefully, requires clear authorization from the current owner. A pause. Then he looked directly at her. And based on what you've told me, his voice lowered. You never gave it. The room went still. Because now, this wasn't confusion. This wasn't miscommunication. This wasn't even betrayal in the usual sense. This was something else. Something bigger. Something that didn't just hurt. It violated. Alyssa's voice was quiet when she asked the next question. So, what does that mean? Mark didn't hesitate. It means one of two things, he said. He held up a finger. Either paperwork was submitted under false pretenses, another finger, or someone signed something they weren't legally allowed to sign. Alyssa's jaw tightened slightly. And the sale? She asked. Mark gave a short, humorless exhale. That's the worst part. He turned the screen back toward himself, typed something quickly, then said, If they go through with that sale... A pause. They're not just selling your house. Another pause. This one heavier. They're committing fraud. Silence. Real silence. The kind that settles in your chest. Because now, there was no gray area. No misunderstanding. No family interpretation. This was legal. Clear. And dangerous. Alyssa nodded once. Slow. Controlled. Because everything she needed, she had it now. Proof. Clarity. Leverage. And most importantly, timing. Because they thought they were ahead. They thought they had already won. They thought she was still figuring it out. But in reality, they were about to walk straight into something they couldn't undo. Alyssa stood up, gathering her documents. Mark watched her carefully. What are you going to do? He asked. She paused at the door. Just long enough to answer. Nothing, she said. A beat. Not yet. Because sometimes, the strongest move isn't stopping something. It's letting it continue. Right up until the moment it collapses. And right now, they were already in motion. The listing was live. The showings had started. The buyers were coming. And very soon, everyone involved was going to find out the truth. All at once. Saturday, 1 p.m. Bright sky, clear weather, perfect for selling a house that didn't belong to you. Alyssa parked 2 streets down. Not in the driveway. Not in front of the house. Not where anyone would expect her. Because today wasn't about arriving. It was about timing. Have you ever watched something unfold, knowing exactly how it's going to end, but letting it play out anyway? That's where Alyssa was. watching, waiting. From a distance, she could already see the signs. Literally, white sign, clean font, arrow pointing directly toward the property. People were already arriving. Couples, a young family, someone walking slowly with a notepad, asking questions before even stepping inside. Interest. Real interest. Which meant offers weren't far behind. Alyssa checked the time. 1:12 p.m. They had started good. She stepped out of the car, calm, composed, dressed simply but intentionally, not like a visitor, not like a buyer, like someone who belonged there, because she did. As she walked up the driveway, the front door was wide open. Voices spilled out, warm, welcoming, sales-driven, great natural light, recent improvements, very motivated sellers. Motivated. That word almost made her smile. Inside, everything looked even more staged than before. Neutral tones, minimal personality, carefully placed decor. It didn't feel like her parents' home. It felt like a product. And right in the center of it, Linda, smiling, engaging, playing the role perfectly. David stood nearby, nodding along quietly. And Ethan? He was talking to a couple near the window. Confident, relaxed, like this was his success story, like he had built something. Alyssa stepped inside. No announcement, no hesitation, just presence. At first, no one noticed. Then Ethan turned and froze. There it was again. That flicker, small, but undeniable. Alyssa, he said too quickly. Linda turned next. Her smile didn't drop, but it changed, tightened, controlled, calculated. Well, this is a surprise, she said lightly. Alyssa didn't respond right away. Instead, she looked around. At the people, at the staging, at the way her house had been turned into something transactional. Then she spoke. Soft, clear, nice turnout. Simple words, but they landed wrong because they didn't sound impressed. They sounded observant. The realtor Sandra Kim approached, professional and upbeat. Hi there, welcome. Are you here for the open house? Alyssa met her eyes, and for just a second, she let the silence stretch. Something like that, she said. Again, same answer. Different weight. Sandra smiled politely, unaware. Well, feel free to look around. This one's getting a lot of attention. I can see that, Alyssa replied. Her gaze shifted past Sandra, back to her family, who now understood something very important. She wasn't here to visit, and she wasn't confused. The room subtly shifted. Buyers still walked around, but the energy changed. Because tension is quiet, but it spreads fast. Alyssa reached into her bag. Slowly, deliberately, Ethan noticed. His posture straightened. What are you doing? He asked. Too direct. Too defensive. Alyssa didn't answer him. Instead, she looked toward the door. Right on cue. It opened, and Mark Feldman walked in. Calm, professional, carrying a slim folder. Not rushed. Not dramatic. Just precise. Sandra turned toward him. Oh, hi. Are you here for... Yes, Mark said politely. I'm here regarding the property. That phrasing. Careful. Intentional. Linda stepped forward now. Smile gone. What is this? She asked. Alyssa finally moved. One step forward. Then another, until she was standing fully in the center of the room. Visible, unavoidable. Every conversation slowed, then stopped. Because people could feel it. Something was about to happen. Something real. Alyssa looked around once. At the buyers, at the realtor, at her family. Then she spoke. Clear, even, controlled. Before anyone here makes an offer. A pause. Just long enough to pull everyone in. You should know something. Sandra blinked. What do you mean? Alyssa didn't look at her. Her eyes stayed on Linda, on Ethan, on David. According to every legal document that matters. Another pause. Mark stepped beside her, opening the folder. Paper visible. Official. Final. Alyssa finished the sentence. And this time, there was no softness in it. This house isn't theirs to sell. Silence. Complete. Immediate. A couple near the window exchanged looks. Sandra's expression shifted from confusion to concern. Ethan let out a short laugh, but it sounded forced. Okay, what are you talking about? Alyssa didn't respond to him. She didn't need to. Because Mark did. Calmly, professionally. This sale, he said, holding up the documents, is not legally valid. And then the line that changed everything. Because the current owner never authorized it. The word hung in the air. Owner. Every eye in the room moved. Back to Alyssa. And in that exact moment, the entire story flipped. This house isn't theirs to sell. And just like that, everything stopped. The quiet kind of stop, not loud, not chaotic, but heavy. The kind where every person in the room suddenly realizes they're standing in the middle of something they were never supposed to be part of. Sandra, the realtor, blinked rapidly. Sorry, what? Mark didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply stepped forward, placing the documents on the kitchen island like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. Original purchase agreement, he said calmly. Wire transfer confirmation. Title record. Sole ownership. Alyssa Carter. Alyssa didn't move. Didn't shift. Didn't look away. Because this wasn't emotional. This was factual. And facts don't need volume. Sandra picked up the documents, scanning quickly. Her professional composure started to crack. I was told ownership was updated, she said, glancing at Linda. Linda stepped forward immediately. It was, she insisted. We filed the paperwork. Mark nodded once. You did. A small pause. Then, and it should never have been accepted. Silence again. Because now, the details mattered. Mark continued, precise and clear. The property was purchased outright by Alyssa Carter. There is no legal mechanism that allows additional parties to be added to the deed without her explicit authorization. He tapped one of the pages. The filing submitted 3 days ago includes a signature that does not match the verified signature on record. That landed hard. Sandra slowly lowered the paper. You're saying this is invalid? I'm saying, Mark replied evenly, that this deed modification is legally defective and under review for fraudulent submission. Fraud. The word changed everything. The buyers didn't wait for clarification. One couple quietly put their brochure down and walked out. Another followed. Within seconds, the energy of curiosity turned into urgency to leave. Because no one wants to buy a problem. Ethan stepped forward, voice sharper now. This is ridiculous, he said. You're blowing this out of proportion. Alyssa finally looked at him. Not angry. Not shouting. Just done. Out of proportion? She repeated quietly. She took one step closer. I bought this house, she said. For them, a small gesture toward Linda and David. No conditions. No expectations. Her voice didn't break. But something underneath it shifted. I gave you security, she continued, looking directly at her mother now. And you turned it into leverage. Linda's expression hardened, but there was something else there now, too. Not confidence. Not control. Something closer to realization. David sat down slowly at the table, his shoulders sinking in a way they hadn't before. Because this wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. This was exposure. Sandra stepped back, holding up her hands slightly. I'm pulling the listing, she said quickly. Immediately. Professional instinct. Damage control. Within minutes, she was on the phone outside. The open house sign would be gone before the hour ended. Legal fallout. Mark didn't waste time. He spoke quietly to Alyssa, but clearly enough for the others to hear. We'll file an official dispute first thing Monday. This will freeze any further action on the property. Alyssa nodded. And the filing? She asked. Mark's tone didn't change. If pursued, it could result in civil liability and potentially criminal charges depending on intent. Linda's composure cracked. Criminal? She said. This is family. Mark met her gaze. This is property law. Simple. Final. Control reclaimed. By that afternoon, the locks were changed again. Legally. This time, by Alyssa. Not secretly. Not manipulatively. Documented. Authorized. Final. Ethan showed up later that evening. Angry. Demanding. This is insane. You can't just kick us out. Alyssa stood in the doorway. Calm. I can, she said. Because it's mine. No raised voice. No argument. Just truth. He didn't have a response for that. Because there wasn't one. Family fallout. Linda called the next day. Different tone. Less control. More urgency. We need to talk, she said. Alyssa listened. Then answered simply. We already did. And ended the call. David sent a message later. Short. I'm sorry. Alyssa read it. Didn't reply. Not out of anger, but because some things don't resolve with one sentence. Social consequences. The story spread. Quietly at first, then wider. Extended family. Mutual connections. And slowly the narrative shifted. Not Alyssa overreacted. But they tried to sell a house that wasn't theirs. And once that version took hold, it didn't let go. A week later, the house was quiet, empty, reset. Alyssa stood outside again. Same porch, same door, same place where this all started. She held the key in her hand, looked at it for a second, then stepped forward. No hesitation this time. She slid it into the lock, turned it, smooth, effortless. The door clicked open, and this time, there was no laughter inside. No tension. No confusion. Just silence. The kind that feels earned. Alyssa stepped in slowly. The house felt different again. Not staged. Not altered. Not taken. Just hers. She walked through each room, not rushing, not inspecting, just existing in it. And somewhere between the kitchen and the living room, she stopped. Not because something was wrong, but because everything finally made sense. This was never just about a house. It was about boundaries, about assumptions, about what happens when people think you won't push back. Alyssa reached into her pocket, pulling out her phone. She opened a note, typed a few lines. Not emotional, not dramatic, just practical. Short-term rental, full control, no shared access. A plan. Her plan. Then she locked her phone, setting it down on the counter. Took one last look around. And exhaled. Not relief. Not victory. Just clarity. She walked back to the front door. Stepped outside. And before closing it, she glanced once more at the space behind her. Then quietly said, this time, it opens. The door shut. Clean. Final. And for the first time since all of this started, there was nothing left unresolved.
So, was this desperation, entitlement, or a calculated plan? What did you miss?